I was standing at the stove stirring gravy when I heard my mother-in-law give away the apartment I had bought with my own hands. The kitchen smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon candles, and through the thin wall separating me from the dining room, I heard my future being decided by people who had never once asked me a single question about it. I was 36. I had paid off that apartment alone, and in 30 seconds, it had become someone else's housewarming gift. But what I did in the next 72 hours, quietly, legally, without raising my voice once, was something none of them saw coming. My name is Carolyn Marsh. I am an estate planner by profession, which means I spend my days helping people protect the things they have built. The irony of what happened to me is not lost on me, and I suspect it will not be lost on you either. I bought my apartment at 29 after 6 years of working 2 jobs and eating lunch at my desk every single day. My mother had passed when I was 24, and she left me nothing except the example of what it looked like to work without complaint and ask for nothing in return. I took that example and I built something with it. A 1-bedroom with a second room I used as an office, on the 4th floor of a building with a courtyard, and good light in the mornings. I signed the closing papers on a Tuesday in March, and I cried in my car afterward, not from sadness, but from the particular relief of a woman who has finally put her feet on solid ground after years of treading water. I painted every wall myself. I learned to grout tile from a video. I hung curtains and assembled furniture and fixed a leaking faucet at 11 at night because I refused to call anyone when I could simply figure it out. That apartment was not just a place to live. It was evidence. Proof that the quiet girl who had grown up watching her mother struggle could stand on her own without anyone's help or permission. I met my husband David 3 years after I moved in. He was kind and funny, and he made me feel, for the first time in a long time, that I did not have to carry everything alone. We married after 2 years. I kept the apartment in my name because we agreed we would eventually sell it and buy something together, something that was ours from the beginning. We simply had not gotten there yet. David's family was large and loud in the way that families are when they have always had enough. Enough money, enough space, enough certainty that the world would arrange itself around their preferences. His mother, Renata, was the kind of woman who made decisions for rooms she was not in. His brother Marcus had married 6 months before us, a woman named Sienna, who was charming and sharp, and who had grown up, as far as I could tell, believing that wanting something was sufficient reason to have it. They lived in a rental across town. They had been complaining about it since before the wedding. I noticed things at Thanksgiving that I filed away without examining too closely. The way Renata kept asking Sienna what neighborhood she preferred. The way Marcus mentioned twice that renting was throwing money away. The way David's father Raymond poured wine for everyone and then looked at me with an expression I could not quite read, something between apology and calculation. Sienna leaned across the table during the salad course and asked me very casually whether the apartment building allowed pets because she had always wanted a dog. I told her yes, the building allowed small dogs. She smiled and looked at Marcus. He looked at his plate. I told myself it was a coincidence. It was not a coincidence. I went to the kitchen to help Renata with the turkey, and she sent me back to the dining room for the serving platter she had forgotten. And I was almost at the door when I heard her voice shift, drop lower, take on that particular warmth it had when she was telling someone something she had already decided. She was on the phone. She was telling whoever was on the other end that the apartment was 2 bedrooms, if you counted the office, that the building was close to Marcus's job, that Caroline had always been sensible and would understand that family came first. I stood in the hallway outside that kitchen with a serving platter in my hand, and I did not move. She said the words that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. She said, in a tone as comfortable and certain as weather, that Caroline didn't really need that much space anyway. It was just her office, just her things, just her name on a piece of paper, just her name on a piece of paper. I walked back to the dining room. I set the platter down. I sat in my chair and I looked at my husband and I searched his face for surprise and I did not find it. What I found instead was the careful stillness of a man who knew something was coming and had not warned me. That hurt more than anything, Renata said on the phone. But I did not let it show. I have spent my career reading rooms and controlling my expression in difficult conversations, and I used every bit of that training to smile through the rest of that meal. After dessert, Raymond stood up and tapped his glass. He talked about family. He talked about Marcus and Sienna starting their lives together and needing a real foundation. He talked about how lucky they were to have someone as generous and understanding as Caroline in the family. He looked at me when he said generous. Then he said that the apartment, my apartment, the one with my name on the deed, would be Marcus and Sienna's Christmas gift from the whole family. A home for the next generation. Sienna started crying. Marcus put his arm around her. Everyone turned to look at me. I smiled. I raised my glass. I said it was a beautiful thought and I meant none of it. Because underneath the smile, something very quiet and very clear had already clicked into place. I was an estate planner. I knew exactly what my rights were. I knew exactly what a deed meant. And I knew that Raymond could stand at the head of that table and announce whatever he liked. But not one syllable of it was legally binding without my signature. And my signature was going to be on something else entirely. I drove home that night with my hands steady on the wheel and my mind 3 steps ahead of the road. I was not going to argue. I had watched enough families tear themselves apart over property to know that argument was a trap. The moment I got emotional, I became the difficult one, the selfish daughter-in-law who put paperwork over people. They had set the stage so that any honest reaction from me would prove their story. So I did not react. I planned. The next morning, I called my colleague Patricia, who handled real estate transactions in our firm, and who owed me a favor I had been saving for something important. I told her I needed to move fast. I told her the property was paid off, title was clean, my name only, no liens, no co-owners. She asked what I needed. I told her I needed to talk to a buyer I had turned down 8 months ago. A property investment group that had made me a written cash offer for the apartment, and whom I had politely declined because I wasn't ready. I was ready now. I found the offer in my email. It was still within range of market value, and when I called the contact number and explained I had changed my mind, the woman on the other end did not hesitate. She said if the title was clean, they could open escrow within 48 hours and close before Christmas. Cash purchase, no financing delays, no contingencies. I said the title was clean. I said, let's move. Before I signed anything, I gave David one chance. I sat across from him at our kitchen table on the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and I told him plainly and without drama what I had heard in the hallway. I told him I knew he had known. I asked him to tell me honestly whether he had agreed to any of this. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said his mother had brought it up, and he had not said yes, but he had not said no either, because he thought maybe I would come around, because it was his family, because it was complicated. I told him I understood complicated. I had been managing complicated my entire adult life. I told him the apartment was mine, and I was selling it, and that what happened between us after that would depend entirely on whether he was able to understand why. He did not say anything for a long time. I left him at the table, and I went to sign the paperwork Patricia had sent. The closing happened on the 23rd of December in a conference room that smelled like fresh coffee and printer paper, with a notary and Patricia and a representative from the investment group. It took 40 minutes. I signed where the flags indicated. I walked out into the cold afternoon air with a cashier's check and the particular lightness of a woman who has just exercised the only authority that has ever truly belonged to her. That evening, Renata called to ask if I had thought about a moving date because Marcus and Sienna wanted to be in before New Year's. I told her there was nothing to move into. She laughed a little, confused. I told her calmly that I had sold the apartment 2 days ago and that the new owners would be taking possession after the holiday. The silence on the other end of the line was the longest silence I have ever heard. Christmas dinner was at Renata and Raymond's house. I went because David asked me to and because I am not built for small disappearances. I brought a dish. I sat at the table. And when Raymond stood up after dinner with a brass key on a ribbon, a prop he had apparently had made, the kind of gesture that tells you exactly how certain someone was of their outcome. I let him finish his speech. I let him hand the key to Marcus. I let Sienna gasp and cry. And then, when the room was still full of the sound of applause and champagne being poured, I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I placed 2 documents on the table. The deed copy with my name highlighted. The closing statement dated December 23rd with the buyer's signature and the sale price and the word that ended everything, sold. I said, you were welcome to offer your son whatever you owned. This was never something you owned. Marcus stared at the closing statement. Sienna went completely still. Raymond's face changed the way faces change when a certainty collapses. Slowly, then all at once. Renata looked at me, and I looked back at her, and I said the words she had said on the phone, quietly, so the whole table had to lean in to hear them. I said, "It was just my name on a piece of paper." I let that land. Then I said, "It turns out that's enough." I left before midnight. I drove with the windows down in the December cold because I needed the air and the dark and the silence of a road that belonged to no one and therefore belonged to me. David called twice. I did not answer. There were things between us that needed time and honesty and more than a December night to untangle, and I was not going to rush them. Some reckonings deserve to be slow. The investment group renovated the apartment in January. I heard from Patricia that they painted the walls white and removed the curtains I had hung. I felt the loss of it, cleanly and briefly, the way you feel the loss of something you chose to release. There is a difference between something being taken and something being let go on your own terms. That difference is everything. What I know now, at 36, that I did not fully understand before. The people who love you are capable of believing that their need for something transfers ownership of it. They are not always cruel. They are sometimes simply certain. Certain that your steadiness is the same as your consent. Certain that your capability means you can afford to give. Certain that your name on a document is a formality compared to the weight of their wanting. It is not a formality. It is the whole truth. You are allowed to own what you have built. You are allowed to protect it without explaining yourself to people who were never going to hear the explanation anyway. You are allowed to be loved and still draw a line that no one gets to cross. I am still drawing mine.